Good day, everyone. I am Angel Palma, and I am going to discuss about the 7 salient features of quality inclusion. Through the years, the government, non-government organizations, and stakeholders has provided great assistance for the expansion of special education here in the Philippines. And it seems that the different private sectors and the government's awareness on giving quality education for the children with special needs had increased. Having special inclusive education manifests an equal response for the persons with disabilities in terms of their education. It is clearly stated in the Batas Pambansa Bilang 232 that the state shall promote and maintain an equality to the access of education, as well as the enjoyment of the benefits of education by all its citizens. Every individual that was born with special needs, may it be physical or mental disabilities, has the right for a proper educational platform to cater or provide their needs. It is also their rights to develop their knowledge and potentials, which the special education offers. The implementation of the Republic Act 7277, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for Disabled Persons, is one of the positive progress in special education. The Magna Carta for Disabled Persons is an act providing for the rehabilitation, self-development, and self-reliance of disabled persons, and also their integration to the mainstream society. The Title 2, Chapter 2 of the RA 7277 is all about the education of the disabled persons. Section 14, Special Education, states that the Department of Education, Culture and Sports shall establish special education classes in public schools in cities or municipalities. It shall also establish, where viable, braille and record libraries in province, cities or municipalities. This is to maintain and support a complete, adequate, and integrated system of education intended for disabled individuals. So now, let us move on to the main topic, which is the 7 salient features of quality inclusion. There are 3 defining features of quality inclusion, and those are the access, participation, and support. The access refers to providing an adequate range of contextually relevant learning opportunities, activities, and settings for all children. The goal in this is to ensure that children have the access to an effective learning environment, routine, activities and settings, and the general education curricula. The next one is the participation. Participation refers that you need to have a focus to ensure that all children are active and independent participants within their families, school, and communities. And the last one is the support. The support refers to a much broader infrastructural level support to the administrators, teachers, staff, and so forth to ensure a high-quality program. This means that the previously mentioned involved person should have the access to a quality professional development, effective ongoing follow-up assistance, and support for their collaborative team. The 7 salient features of quality inclusion are adopted from the Preschool Inclusion Toolbox by Erin E. Barton and Jacqueline Joseph. These features were determined with early childhood programs in mind. However, they can also be applied in K-12 classrooms. So the first key feature of quality inclusion is the intentional, sufficient, and supported interactions between peers with and without disabilities. In an inclusive classroom, the foremost developmental task of a child is to be an accepted member of a peer group. This will test how they are socially competent as an individual at their age. From this, they develop their relationship with their peers by the continuous interaction with them, exhibiting their communication skills. Children with disabilities should have a multiple opportunity to interact with typically developing peers and vice versa. Peer interactions should be supported to promote the development of friendship among peers. So it is important to prevent the social isolation and social rejection that the children with disabilities might feel. Furthermore, peers provide positive, competent models that allows the children with disabilities to learn new skills through imitation. The second key feature is the specialized individualized supports. Supports should be given to children based on their individual needs. For children to actively participate in an inclusive classroom, individualized support must be given to children with special needs. There should be a sufficient number of instructional trials or strategies that are applicable to their case to provide the support intended for them. The third one is the family involvement. A family-centered approach is central to the general philosophy of early childhood special education. It is because family plays a vital role for the development of their children. The program alone is not sufficient enough to prepare children for school. What they need is support from their family or particularly their parents. That is why inclusive schools encourage family involvement, engagement, and participation. The next one is the inclusive interdisciplinary services and collaborative teaming. This is related to the better outcome for children and their families. Families of young children with disabilities and with high needs interact with many different services and organizations. High-quality inclusive schools should establish a structure and process for collaborative teaming. The collaborative teaming was a critical feature of successful high-quality inclusive programs. It requires support from the administration, frequent opportunities for teams and families to meet, shared goals and instructional plans, and clearly identified roles and responsibilities within. The fifth key feature is the focus on critical and sociological outcomes. Sociological outcomes mainly refer to the social acceptance, participation, and friendships. An inclusive classroom should result with children forming a positive and meaningful social relationships, independently participating in their classroom and community, and having a sense of belonging. The sixth one is effective ongoing administrative supports. Best practices for administrators and practitioners increase the probability of positive outcomes for the children. So aside from giving the supports intended for children in an inclusive classroom or setup, it is also important to give support for the administrators, staffs, and practitioners. Should always be a proper professional development and coaching for them. And the last one is the ongoing program evaluation. High-quality inclusive programs include mechanisms for ongoing program evaluation that are sustainable, linked directly to the program philosophy, goals, and curricula, and encompass input from families and practitioners. The program innovation might lead or result in some minor changes for an individual child or major changes in the program. The 7 salient features of quality inclusion are what defines and pictures a high-quality inclusive school. Each point has provided and explained what are needed by the children with or without special needs in an inclusive educational setup. We must always remember that all these features will greatly help the learners to develop their fullest potential as an individual.
Good day, everyone! My name is Ellie May Ortiz, and I will be discussing about approaches to make inclusive education work in regular schools. We must understand that having an inclusive education requires a lot of care to function. In able to make inclusive education work, there are a lot of things to consider, and one of it is to learn the different approaches to make inclusive education work in regular schools. The following are the approaches, which are: number 1, establishment of a SPED center which will function as a resource center. Number 2, information, dissemination, and education. Number 3, strengthening the support services. Number 4, parent and community involvement. And lastly, number 5, utilization of the team approach to mastery or TAM. The first approach is establishment of a SPED center which will function as a resource center to support children with special needs enrolled in regular schools, assist in the conduct of in-service trainings for regular teachers, administrators, and prospective SPED teachers, conduct continuous assessment of children with disabilities and their referral, and produce appropriate teaching materials. The aim here is to fully support the children with disabilities with their needs and learning. The second one is information, dissemination, and education. In this approach, explanation of the concepts of integrated education and inclusive schools to parents and family members, administrators, supervisors, and the community. Next, in-service training in special needs, education for all classroom teachers. Lastly, continuous orientation of the school personnel and pupils in inclusive schools. The goal of this approach is to orient the peers and environment that will have a close contact with the children with disabilities and to let them know what is the best approach for them. It is also possible that they will tackle here the difference between the traditional to inclusive education. The third approach is strengthening the support services, which include the following. Number 1, hiring of trained SPED teacher to serve as a resource teacher, itinerant teacher, or consulting teacher. Second, continuous in-service training of SPED teachers and administrators. Third, provision of specialists like physical therapists, speech therapists, and other specialists whenever available. Fourth, hiring of teacher aides from trained parents, community-based rehabilitation workers, community volunteers, and other with specialized trainings. Fifth, implementation of the buddy system where a trained classmate can be paired with a pupil who has disability. And lastly, provision of instructional materials, assistant devices, and essential equipment. As I said earlier, having an inclusive education requires a lot of care to function. In order to do that, the support services, which are those people who have a close contact with the children with disabilities, must be trained enough in order to function well with each other. The fourth one is parent and community involvement. In this approach, it includes the following. 1. Provision of parent education. 2. Involving families, people with disabilities, and the community in the decision-making processes. 3. Linkage with other government and non-governments working for children with disabilities. Parent and community are the key factor that can affect the children directly. So this approach will help them to give the best decision for the children's welfare. The last approach, which is utilization of the team approach to mastery, or TAM. In TAM classrooms, learners with disabilities are educated alongside their non-disabled peers. Throughout the entire school day, there is an average ratio of 2 non-disabled children to each child with disability.
These are the programs and projects for special education, or SPED. SPED Personnel Enhancement Program for Inclusive Education. To keep the quality of the teachers, school administrators, and supervisors for special education and for inclusive education, The government provide workshops, programs, and even seminars for the special education personnel, especially for the teachers, so that they will more understand what approach they may use to the children with special needs. Summer training for the teachers of the hearing impaired and visually impaired. Training workshop for the teachers of children with mental handicap. Scholarship program on organization, administration, and supervision in special education. It is 5-month duration with a 10-week practicum. Mobile training for trainers in SPED, training programs for the teachers in the school integration of children with autism, and lastly, competence enhancement of SPED personnel through national conferences and/or congresses. For the next project is resource materials development for the children with special needs. One of the functions of Special Education Division is to conduct studies necessary for preparation of instructional or resource material for special education. These are the following preparations. Material production in Braille in large print. PPHB or Philippine Printing House for the Blind prepare all the textbooks in Braille and large print. These materials are distributed to the schools with unorganized classes for the blind upon request. Resources for the Blind Incorporated, also helping the PPHB in massive production of resource materials in Braille using computers. SPED Division also developed finalization and printing handbooks on inclusive education, educating children with learning disabilities, educating children with behavioral problems, socio-recreational and sports activities, and lastly, learning competencies for the gifted, and enrichment materials for the grade 1 to grade 3. Except for inclusive education and learning competencies for the gifted, and enrichment materials for grade 1 to grade 3, the rest are still in the process of finalization and printing.
Researches on children with special needs. To ensure baseline data for program development, the following initiatives are ventured into. Curriculum provide direction for children with special needs. Special children have special needs. When it comes to discipline techniques, tricks that may work for a typical child may not work or could backfire with a special needs student. So, the discipline your child receives in her special needs classes may likely be unfamiliar to you. Examples are praise. Praising a special education student for what he has done right will reinforce good behavior and create confidence in making the right choices. While it is important to discourage negative behaviors, it is even more essential to emphasize the positive one. Special needs students tend to be praise hungry. They are often used to hearing about what they've done wrong. Telling them when they've done something right will grab their attention and reinforce good behaviors. Next is redirection. Redirecting a child from an undesirable behavior to one that is more appropriate is an effective behavior modification technique used in most special education classrooms today. With redirection, the child is distracted from the inappropriate behavior and is encouraged to focus on a task that will help him to behave correctly. Next is impact of modified curriculum program for special learners. Curriculum modification consists of the adjustment educators make the curriculum to make them accessible for students with special needs. Educators classify curriculum modification as a type of educational strategy. They are a set of resources designed to allow special needs students to have better access to information. Next is the computer-assisted instruction for the gifted. This allows students to work at their own level and pace. This mode of instruction can be very beneficial to gifted students who often have interests and abilities that go beyond the scope of their regular curriculum. Another program is the Head Start program for the gifted. This is a preparatory program for 4 to 5-year-old children who have manifest superior intelligence beyond their chronicle age. The continuing challenge upon us is to provide the best to all children within the mainstream through highly effective and innovative strategies in an enriched and conducive learning environment. These strategies could help solve problems for children with special needs faced with challenges in learning, like professional development, an absence of adequately skilled personnel, and a limited investment in training for professionals to assist them in learning and implementing inclusive practices. Problems like resources, funding shortages for materials, equipment, and technology, as well as barriers resulting from overcrowded facilities and inadequate time for planning and collaboration between staff members. Instructional practices, an inadequate understanding of general education practices, and how students with disabilities can participate in general education instruction while providing special instructions in a unique educational goals, as well as physical barriers, economically deprived school systems, especially those in rural areas, and poorly cared for buildings that restrict accessibilities. Solving these problems could give the children a better future in learning.